doll store, and now not only did she work full-time, she and Saul had fallen in love and gotten married. So Rachel Ann held out the hope maybe part-time would turn to full-time in the future at the shop. Rachel Ann glanced up as Sam banged his spoon on the table, and she frowned. It was so sad Elizabeth had suffered a miscarriage. Sometimes when she thought no one noticed, Elizabeth looked so lost, and Rachel Ann suspected she'd thought of the Bopley she miscarried. Try as she might, she never felt she offered the comfort her friend needed, even though Elizabeth said people didn't need words. They needed someone to listen, and Rachel Ann had listened when she needed it. She slung the strap of her lunch tote over her shoulder, grabbed her purse and jacket, and walked over to the table to kiss everyone goodbye. "I won't be home for supper," she reminded her mother, as she bent to give her a hug. You smell like apples." "Not from rubbing applesauce in my hair," her mother said with a laugh. "Look at this. I may still be getting it out of Sam's hair when you do get home." Sam heard his name and giggled. His hair, golden blonde and straight, stood up in stiff little peaks full of oatmeal and applesauce. "I hear some English women pay a lot of money for facials with oatmeal," Rachel Ann told her. "Have a good day. Tell Dad I'm sorry I missed him." "He'll be home from the auction when you get in this evening." "I might be late." "Not too late." Her mother gave her the look mothers seem so good at. It spoke volumes. "Mom, I'm 21. "I know how old you are. I was there, remember?" her mother said dryly. "And you know it's not safe to be out too late. Drivers aren't always looking out for someone walking or even riding in a buggy." I know. She bent and hugged her mother and then her Bruda before she walked out the door. Even though she knew her dad wasn't in the barn, she couldn't help glancing that way as she walked down the drive. A movement caught her eye. Abram Lapp stood watching her from the porch next door. He lifted a hand in greeting, and she waved back. She liked him. They'd been friends since they were toddlers. They'd sat near each other in shul and even attended a singing together once. But now they were in their 20s, and their friendship hadn't turned into something romantic the way some had in her community. She felt Abram was too serious for her, too settled. Rachel Ann liked Rumschpringe and didn't want to settle down yet, and she didn't think she wanted to date an Amish man. As a matter of fact, she knew she didn't. She stood at the bottom of the drive for only a few minutes when a car pulled up and the driver leaned over to grin at her. "Hey, babe, been waiting long?" Rachel Ann opened the passenger door and got in quickly. She glanced back at the house as she pulled on her seatbelt. "Please hurry up and get going. I don't want Mom to see." Michael leaned over to kiss her cheek, and then he straightened, checked the road, and pulled out, tires screeching. "Don't do that!" She slumped down in her seat and prayed her mother didn't hear the tires or look out the window. When she glanced over her shoulder, she saw Abram still standing on his porch looking in her direction. She frowned. Why was he watching her? She hoped he wouldn't tell her mom what he'd seen. "Make up your mind, babe. I make a quick getaway, it's gonna be noisy." Rachel Ann bit her lip and frowned when she looked over and saw how fast the car was going. Maybe instead of praying her mother didn't see her, she should pray God would slow down the car. She pulled the visor down and checked her reflection in the mirror. Her starched white cap looked slightly askew. It must have bumped when she got into the car. She straightened it, fastened it more securely with covering pins, then smoothed her blonde hair worn center parted and tucked back in a bun. Her blue eyes sparkled, and color bloomed on her cheeks even though she didn't wear makeup. She folded back the visor, leaned back in her seat, and watched Michael as he drove. The fall breeze coming in the window tossed his black hair away from his lean face, the bright morning light giving it a bluish gleam like a raven's wing. He must have felt her staring at him because he turned and winked at her. Life had become exciting lately. New job, new boyfriend. She felt like she was going down a new path for her, one she hadn't ever dared to dream. "Got something good to eat in there?" he asked, gesturing at the lunch tote. She nodded, got out one of the sandwiches she'd packed, and unwrapped it for him. He took it and bit into it. He said as he took a bite. "Way to old man's heart." "So what are we doing later?" "How about pizza and a movie?" "Sounds good. Good. I get off at 5:30. Michael finished the sandwich in a few bites. Anything else in the bag? A whoopie pie. He took his eyes off the road for a moment. I love those. I know. He loved her baking. She unwrapped the big cream-filled cookie and handed it to him. Fabulous things, he said, licking his lips after biting into it. They're the best I've ever had, and I've been eating them for years. She glowed at his praise, but shrugged. Her whoopie pies were good, but so are those made by many of her friends and women in the Amish community. He dropped her off at the shop, promising to pick her up at closing time. She drifted inside on a happy haze. Good maira, Leah said, looking up from paperwork spread on the front counter. Yeah, it is, Rachel Ann said. A good morning. Abram stood on his porch and watched Rachel Ann hurry down her drive and stand there waiting at the bottom of it. She seemed awfully eager for her ride to her new job. He'd managed to get it out of her. She had found a job when he talked to her the night before. As usual, he'd found an excuse to take something over to her house and get himself invited to supper. Yesterday, he'd visited a friend who had produced a bumper crop of pumpkins, so he'd carried a few over to Rachel Ann's mum. He and his mom had decided they had more than enough for the two of them. Now, finished with morning chores, he stood drinking his coffee on the front porch and watched Rachel Ann impatiently tapping her foot. He knew he had to figure out some way to get himself invited to supper again tonight. He wanted to find out how her day had gone, how she'd liked working in his shop when she'd been so afraid she'd have to take the job offer from an Englishwoman to work as a mother's helper. He just plain wanted to be near her, even when she had never looked at him as more than the boy next door who'd been her friend at shul. A car came into view, one he judged to be traveling faster than the speed limit. He stiffened when it pulled up in front of Rachel Ann, worried it might hit her. But it stopped, and he realized she knew the driver, for she opened the door and jumped inside. She glanced back at her house and then must have sensed him staring at her, for her eyes met his for just a moment. And then the car took off at a greater speed than it had approached, peeling away from the curb with a squeal of tires. It zoomed down the road. Abram felt his heart leap into his throat as he realized he waited to hear a crash as it sped down the road and vanished from sight. The door opened at Rachel Ann's house, and her mother stuck her head out. She looked down the drive. Then, just as she turned back, she glanced in his direction. Good Maria, Abram. Good Maria. What was that racket I heard? He hesitated for only a moment. Just a car. Someone wanting to leave rubber on the road instead of their tires. She shook her head. Makes no sense. Then her hand flew to her throat. It wasn't Rachel Ann's van driver, was it? Nay. It wasn't a lie, he told himself. It hadn't been the van driver. Her hand fell to her side. Of course it wasn't. She brightened. Come for supper, Abram. While Sam naps this afternoon, I'm making pumpkin pie from those pumpkins you brought me. Donkey, I'll do that. She walked back inside and shut the door. Abram stood there for a moment, wondering if he should have told her what he'd seen. He took a sip of coffee and found it had grown cold and bitter. Grimacing, he tossed the contents over the porch railing and went inside. His mother glanced up and smiled at him as she stood at the stove. Ready for some breakfast? He nodded and walked over to the percolator to pour himself another cup of coffee. Why don't you let me cook? I like to cook for you. Abram leaned down and kissed her cheek. And I don't mind admitting I like you cooking for me. But you don't look like you slept well. Why didn't you stay in bed? She made a tisking noise and shook